How's it going, YouTube? My name is Andreas, and today I'm going to talk about my first hands that I played in PLO200 this year, and basically what has been going wrong. Maybe you follow me on Instagram and you can basically find out that I dropped quite a bit on this new limit, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what happened here. Well, let's have a look at the biggest 50 pots. It's going to be rather going to through them a bit quickly. A race call here against someone who seems to be fairly loose, and flop the world. And even though he finds a pot size bet with 2 pair and open hand and a flush draw, and the money goes in. Especially he shouldn't be having too many super strong hands. Maybe some overpair like kings plus a flush draw plus a gutshot or something. And the board runs out 9-10, and he has actually the nuts and top 2 pair. But we had even fair equity against that, I think about 43%. Here we got a double suited marginal cutoff hand, but it's fine. We get squeezed, we call the squeeze, and surprisingly this short stack shoves over the top, but this guy actually doesn't. ISO shove as a 5-bet, I believe, and we take a flop, have a rather favorable block with a pair and an open ender, and unfortunately the board runs out a 6-3, so he makes about a 2 pair. Here we got a also marginal button flat hand, but it's double suited, and we're facing loose ranges, not really correct ranges, so to speak. Go forward to the flop, and here it's very notable that normally I would actually call here, but this guy here, over a fairly large sample, c-bets at a way too high frequency. So I'm assuming he's gonna have some, kings and aces with a flush draw, and against the queen I'm actually at 38% here, so I'm actually trying to win the $50 right away, not having a heart in my hand, raise, get called, and then money goes in on a turn. And unfortunately he shows up with the queen jack 10-9, has me super crushed. He has every single card except for my 3. This is worst case scenario, except for him obviously turning the quads, which I think he would shove on the flop anyway, and I would be doing actually fine against that with around 40% of equity. But I was hoping for him to have the hearts and the overpair. Didn't happen, and was unfortunately punished for my raise there with the worst case scenario. Maybe I could have gotten away from it by just calling, but as I said, I had reasons to be raising there. Here actually leading 4-way. Also notable, I have a top set blocker, which really matters. Now on this turn card, I think from my sizing, I size it down a little bit. Usually I would go for, much bigger. I mean, not that much bigger, but closer to pot size in order to not make it so simple for them to call with the sets. Now we do have a 6 on the river, which is sort of interesting. As I said before, he could have a set draw, which is, most likely going to be top set draw, but as I said, we're blocking that, and then can have the king eye flushes. So because I have a 10 in my hand, and the 6 makes the quads, this boat exactly should be not helping him too much. Also, there is half of a pot size bet left. It's going to be tough for him to get away from his king eye flush draw. Most likely he does also not seem to be liking to fold to c-bets in general. Same guys before. I go ahead and jam, get called, and he has a 9-6-6-4 suited. Sometimes it's just not your day. Kings here, fairly interesting. I'm going to add and call here, and then actually short stack, limp raises. And a lot of the times when they limp raise, they have aces. And the question is, how short does this guy's stack have to be in order for me to reopen as a 5-bet, 3-bet, 4-bet, 4-bet jam here against those call calls? Because I'm certainly, doing fine against those players' ranges, as they don't seem to be interested in jamming preflop, indicating that they don't have aces, mainly the hand I'm worrying about. But if he does have aces here, and by the way, this would be an easy fold if he were full stacked, but as he moves down to 42 big blinds, I actually don't think that this is a very simple scenario here at all. And as I said, I'm doing fine against those two, so it becomes like a math game. And I think in hindsight, if this guy with his stats only does it with aces and not some double suited other hands, it's not gonna be that good of a play. We go all in, and as I said, I was doing actually fine against them, but then unfortunately this guy actually does have aces. Also, if everyone was at 100 big blind stack, we would have ended up with only 8% of equity, because this guy also coincidentally has the clubs, which also, steals me quite some equity. We have another hand here, ace, 9, 10 deuce double suited, flop really great, go for the check raise, deny some equity, make him pay for his weaker draws, and then the money goes in on the turn, and he actually had a wrap, which we had dominated. It's a 66 to 33% favorite, but then on the turn, he actually got there on a pot size left shove. 3-bet the aces here, quite standard. It's an SPR 3. I'm going to have aces here the majority of the time, around 50-60%. And, you know, maybe 50% is enough. And then I basically pot get it in. And he shows up with the, unfortunately, ace, king, 7, 9 double suited, which is a favorite against my hand because he also has a pair next to his flush draw and a backdoor flush draw. So here I got ace, jack, 7, 5 double suited. I actually ended up 4-betting against Badger. As you can see from the stats, you really want to have some 4-bets like this, you know, and this is Monker approved. And then, you know, on this texture, I'm going to go for the bet shove and see what he shows up with. And unfortunately, at a king for this rainbow, do not 3-bet call a 4-bet with this hand. It's atrocious, but unfortunately, he also hit the trips on the turn. We got the jack 9, check 10, 9, 6 double suited. We flop 2 pair and 2 backdoor flush draws, and in a SPR of about 12, big blind versus cutoff, this qualifies as a check raise for me. I think at the time, also Gozu was more or less c-betting around more 80% of the time. I don't know, it has gone down with a bigger sample to about 68. When you check the flop c-bet size, you can see that in position he actually c-bets way too much and shouldn't hit all the board. And I have a good hand. Unfortunately, he 3-bets the flop, and you know, with 2 backdoor flushes, I don't think I can get away from it. I can still have some 10-6 speed, and you know, against a set of 6s and set of 4s, I'm not in super terrible shape given the price that I have, and obviously hope that that's not the case. And then, you know, the worst case would be he shows up with the top set here, having a 40% range and us blocking it on the flop. Fairly unfortunate hand as well. Here, this is actually going to be a fairly fun hand to play. Fisherman opens it up, and then Gosu, who has an 80% 3-bet on this, you know, 620 hand sample. I'm going to actually go ahead and cold call here. And then I face the 4-bet, which might me want to think he has aces a lot. And I'm actually, you know, ready to, I guess, fold. But then this guy shoves as well, which, you know, makes it fairly likely that both players have aces. And given my set that I'm already priced in here a little bit, I'm actually going to make the call. I mean, this guy could also have ace, king, king, or like some double suited ace, 6, 7, 8. Not really sure what he does with the hands. It looks like, you know, he's been 4-betting, but the sample is not really that big, and he might be aware that Gosu is fairly light. So all in all, fairly close. Let's see what they have. They actually show up with aces and unfortunately not aces. He has ace, king, king, which makes this, if I knew the hands, a fold. But all in all, you know, it's quite a close spot. Ran a little bit of math. It's, I think, 34% if they both have aces. Given that I'm priced in, I think I need 29.8%. And with the clubs being dominated, I ended up having only 26, I think. And yeah, not really favorable situation with the hands that they have, or that they had. So here I basically have a big pot already brewing, and I flop fairly great here for a low SPR. And he ends up having the check 9-8-7, which unfortunately flop 2 pair and got a fairly, you know, slightly dominating. But I was dominating his hand pre-flop. It's just an unfortunate flop. But fairly standard stack off on this low SPR. This is actually a fairly interesting hand. It's one of the hands that, you know, has made me think quite a bit. I do get 4-bet small. I don't think this is necessarily going to be ace solved. I mean, it's going to be fairly fishy when they do this. If I had a different hand than this, I might actually put in a 5-bet as a bluff, but with this hand, I think it's just fairly standard call. I do flop a hand that I cannot get away from against a half pot to c-bet, even though the texture favors aces. I think at the stack depth, I was going to 5-bet all my aces anyway, so I'm not going to have these hands. I could still have, you know, some hands that are ace, king, 10, 8, double suited type of hands. This is going to be the major check call, and then once he check backs, this is going to be my major value bets when I do have 2 pair and don't check raise right away on the flop. In terms of bluffs, 8, 9, 10 jack double suited, and this hand is probably the main bluffs that I'm gonna have here. I'm gonna have to choose a bigger sizing because my range is narrow to begin with anyway. And yeah, you might actually think that I'm over bluffing here massively, but I think the 1 pair hands I'm gonna fold and the 2 pair hands are gonna call. He shows up with the 4-7, so it's a 2 pair. He doesn't have the ace block. You know, given that he has the spades, I think he could have even found a fold with this, but he also blocks some of the 2 pair combinations that I could have ended up on the river with. So yeah, don't mind the call when he's, you know, basically rivering the 2 pair with his exact holding. Also, I don't have, you know, the top of my range, meaning, you know, sets all that often, really, so don't mind the hand at all. But it's a tough spot for sure to be thinking about what you want to, you know, how you want to construct your river betting range. This is definitely a mistake. This is a check back. I ended up betting and then getting it in. This is too loose for an SPR 3, clear mistake. He ended up having jacks and threes, so he was a 70-30 favorite for SPR 3. That's not a good thing for me. Ace jack jack 4 ended up 4-betting against someone who's really crazy in the small blind, obviously as a bluff. But I think as a 4-bet he plays better than as a call, but I didn't really want to fold. He shoves and he shows the ace 10-9-7, which is a flip on the flop. Aces here, again, a squeeze. And then we get it in on an SPR 2 point something, 2.3. He ends up having a very good hand on the flop, pair, flush draw, gut shot. Unfortunately, I'm also an underdog here. Queen 9-8-5, double suited. I don't know what happened here, but I think someone just put in a $30 and I thought that jamming here was going to be fine in order to, you know, maybe sometimes making him fold instead of just calling and then playing a low SPR in position. So what happened here is he actually did fold, so it worked out quite okay. And he ended up having the limp-raised aces, which often are going to be rainbow. Honestly, when they have a raising range, they're raising their suited aces or the better aces, and when they have worse aces, they're going to limp jam them, you know, trying to get the most money in as possible. I have to be careful because I've seen actually a lot of limp raising going on the last few days on PLO200, so I have to be careful what I'm isolating, and maybe that has been a little bit too loose to begin with. But it has been actually a fine situation with the dead money there. I was actually getting the right price. Here, this is probably the worst hand, the one I regret the most. I did up betting here with the ace jack. And the thing is here, I thought at the time that, you know, if he has something like 4s plus something, it's going to be 4-4, 5-6, 4-4, something that connects well and has some gut shots and some additional equity here on this board. And if he has spades, I was fairly certain he was going to check jam the turn the majority of the time, trying to get exactly value from this hand. And if you run this in Monk, it's actually a bad call on the turn anyway. But then on this river card, because he literally could, you know, improve with some of his ace 3, this could be, you know, just easily checked behind, and ended up actually having the 4-4 with the 5-6 and even with the spades, which, you know, by the way, you know, you can just check jam and actually get value from some worse hands. Sure, you're gonna run into aces and jacks occasionally, but definitely try to get value here on the turn right away. Also having some protection with the 4-6 of spades in case your opponent does have aces. Also, you have the open ender. You're really, you know, looking to basically not slow play this in a turn, because, you know, he was gonna miss out value if I actually happened to check back this hand, which unfortunately didn't. And I kind of regret the decision, looking at also how he did play in the end. Sometimes you just have to figure that it. Half pot, a little bit more than that. I'm going to check call, even 3-way. Sure, we have both responsibility to basically defend against this bet size. I just have enough here, I think, to check call. I have a backdoor, not flush draw, I have queens, and I have a gut shot and a king of spades, which, you know, will be fairly relevant as the hand progresses. I check all the turn because we improve. Also, fortunately for me, didn't pot size bet, even though I would have had to call against this as well. But I get like a small discount, and we will find out why we got the discount. We jam the river as a bluff. This is going to be one of the, you know, few bluffs that I'm going to have here. A lot of the times I'm actually will have spades, because I'm not going to c-bet this with, for example, aces, kings with spades here, given that I actually don't have a 7 in my hand or an 8. Only when I have spades plus a gut shot plus something, then I can basically get it in. But yeah, gonna jam here. And then the reason why we got the discount, because he actually did have 8 jack and the spades, and I think the 2 pair, which is the super nuts. And sometimes when people have the super nuts, is a thing for you guys to remember. They, you know, just bet slightly smaller to basically suck you into the pot or give you a better chance to hang yourself. Here, I mean, yeah, basically almost a pre-flop all-in. He ends up outdrawing me on the flop with the flop top 2 pair and rakes in a big pot. Ace, queen, queen, deuce, ended up 3-betting here. And then with pot size and a half left, I'm gonna get the money in against Mr. Nebula. Unfortunately here, also he has the ace, king, 6, 7 double suited. As you can see, he doesn't really fold to 3-bets. He starts with 21% before the flop. Yeah, I'm gonna switch it off. And yeah, cannot really do much here in this spot. This is an interesting hand. We're somewhat shallow. I think we still have to defend. It's better than folding with the king, queen, 10-8. We could have already found a fold given that there's a short stack maybe on the button to begin with. That's another story. We do call and a fold on 4 9s and an ace, but that's not the case in this turn. I end up calling as king, king, 9-8, which dominates me a little bit as well. So I still got the right price. Unfortunately, we couldn't make something happen there. Queen, queen, 8-8 here. SPR 2.5. I'm gonna get the money in. Running to ace, queen, and 4, which I think he's also a favorite here, but not by insanely much. Also, we have 1 spade. Aces here, 3-bet with a suit, creating an SPR 2 seems fine against Zad. We bet small and then stack off on this board in particular on SPR 2 and, you know, having the equity. Hopefully he doesn't have a 7, and he didn't. He had 4, 6, 8 king for flush draw and open ender. And we do actually lose it, unfortunately, on the river. Here I have a guy called Label 12, and he actually c-bets at around 80% frequency. So I actually decided to check raise bluff here and then fold to jam. He did not jam, he just called. And then I jammed on improving cards, and he ended up calling. He did have the ace-5, unfortunately. You can also see that, by the way, to confirm that, 93% c-bet in position. We can expect quite some bet folds here. And also, you know, in terms of bluffs, I like this hand for sure. Ace, queen, 10-5 here. To go ahead and c-bet, I think might be a mistake. Checking back might be better, especially with the backdoor flush draw. He check calls, however, and we see a good turn, but he leads. When he leads here, I mean, I just have to go into bluff catching mode. He can have some 5, 6, ace, 5. And then also some 2 pairs with a 5 blocker potentially. And on the river, when he pots his bets, he's basically saying he has 5, 6 or ace 5. Because I almost never have 5, 6 anyway. When I'm in this position, I think he can pot his bet ace 5 easily for value. Bluffs are theoretically possible when he has 5s in a weird play way, but they're not too many. I ended up calling because I'm at the top of my range here. And he ended up, unfortunately, not having the ace-5, but the 5-6, as you can see here, he had a, you know, here the thing is, you know, has a gotcha, but what needs to be said about it, if he, for example, turns the 8 of hearts, he's going to make a, you know, very, very strong check raise hand. He's going to turn a wrap and a flush draw, basically. So he was basically hoping for the 8 and that not to connect with my hand so much, or just bink the lucky card and just, you know, hope that I have a bluff catcher, which unfortunately happened here as well. Aces here. SPR 2 ended up check ripping the turn. Don't think with top pair and a flush draw and an 8 block I can fold here. He ends up having also a 2 pair, but I'm doing fairly well against that. He also checked down on the flop, which he shouldn't do with too many straights. So fine hand there. Here's also a hand that I misplayed on the turn. Even though I don't think he has particularly many diamonds, because diamonds have usually a straight draw with it and should be check jammed a lot. Also should not lead the turn a lot. He actually will have a straight here, and I try to outrun him with, unfortunately, a little bit too little money behind. With the rep on 12 card rep, given I discount like 1/8 maybe, I'm gonna have around 25, 26%, and I need 33, so I'm getting the slightly incorrect price, even with the implied odds, and unfortunately missed the river. And I would have already also basically got the money on diamonds. Also, in terms of, you know, trying to bluff rivers, I'm not sure how easily that would have worked out. Here, ended up having a flat from the button. He has a 41% range. I have no idea what he has at this point. And ended up actually deciding for the check getting in on the SPR 1.6 turn. And he ends up actually having the 9-8-5-5 for a turn straight. Not so much fun, but also don't think I can get away from that. Here, this is actually one of the few bluffs that I'm going to show you, and this session review is one of the bigger hands. I end up calling the queen 10-10, also basically setting myself up for some river bluffs with the 10s, depending on what shows up on the river. And this, I think, is one of the few bluffs that I will end up having here. I think the bet size here also seems somewhat sort of weak. He could have a 7, and I don't think he's, he might fold a 7, he might not. Most people probably don't, because, there's only a 10-7 that beats a 7. But, he could also be bluffing with a 2 pair that I'm not able to beat, so I turn my hand into a bluff. I cannot really bluff catch here. So, yeah. However, he ends up calling, which I took a note on for sure, because he only has a 3 deuce, which I think is a fold. Definitely when people bet size, chooses bet size on the river, I can jam any 7 for sure. I don't think, you don't have to be worried about 10-7 in particular, because people are just going to bet bigger on that all the time. I'm also going to have a bunch of straights here that are 7, and yeah, I can definitely shove them and put some pressure on, or just get value from his shitty 3 deuce, I guess. And then I'm not going to have 10-10 queen and 10-10 jack all that often, because these are the only bluffs that make a lot of sense here to use. Here against wide ranges, this is a squeeze in the book, or in my book. This guy calls, and then this guy reopens, and unfortunately I think we're still going to be committed with our 50 big blind stack 3-way. He ends up having flat trapped 3 spades aces, which seems okay. I would prefer probably 3 betting still, button versus cutoff. Then here we are gonna go multi-way, trying to also make use of our relative position here. Obviously we flop the super nuts. We don't have, there's nothing else we can do, but maybe sometimes we put him in a bad spot because he has some bigger stacks. This is really what short stacking is about. You try to shove some flops, and then some people might not actually stack off, even though they would against you, but they have some other people behind. Oh shit. Yeah, I actually wanted to show the result. Sorry about that. Come on. Yeah. So the result was, we got it in, and I think we won this spot. Oh no, we didn't. Yeah, we got it in good on the turn. He just rivered a flush. He has gut shot and a flush from the flop, which, cannot fold. Here we end up having a very good hand against Gozu, who donk bets. We could call, we could raise. I decided to go and raise and try maybe have some fold equity and some 10-5 in gutters, or just some bare 10-5s that you could have here with. If you look at his donking range, he donks 11%. Could certainly be a hand that bet folds here, and try to capitalize on that. Here against an 8% 3-bet, I'm going to call the king 10-7, being out a big one steep. This time not short stacking. Ended up making the nuts. And then betting a little bit too small on turn. I would rather see a bet size a little bit bigger, not because he just made his hand on the river, but, basically to charge his straws, because having no board pair or no club, makes this really a hand that wants to bet really big. And yeah, goes check on the river. He rivered a flush too. Here I got it in 4-way as a short stack. Also getting quite some nice dead money. I think 37 pre-flop, 37% against Gozu, who again has me beat with the aces and even a king. But, he didn't at least have my suit beat. Ace, queen, queen 7, 3-bet here against a fishy player. And, I'm not folding SPR 1 point something when I have a 7 and then, queens plus and a backdoor flush draw. It's my default. And he ends up having the 2 pair. Ace, queen, deuce 5 double. Squeezing against also, again, very loose ranges, as you can see here from these people. Trying to make some people fold, which doesn't happen. We have some dead money in there, $14. And I think, again, we run into aces with also having a 5. So, again, not very favorable outcome. But we had the blockers, and I think it's correct to go with it there. Yeah, in 4-way here, given that I have that, I think... Yeah, someone... Actually, it's 3-way, right? An SPR 2. Yeah, then I cannot get away from it. I don't mind my line. So this does end up having an 8, which, often is going to be the case unless he has a draw. But having so much equity against non-boats, I don't see myself fold. And I end up losing the spot as well in SPR 2. Like SPR 3 or higher, I won't mind, you know, giving him the pot, but you have to fight for SPR2s here. By the way, pre-flop we have 70 big blinds, and he has 50 big blinds. He opens a 32% range, and I think kings then against his stack size is going to become a 3-bet. Unfortunately, he has the aces again. But yeah, these stack sizes getting in with kings is not going to be that big of a mistake. Of course, I'm folding to 4-bets when deeper, when it's really clear that they're going to have these hands. But, you know, he's a fairly spew player all in all. And yeah, for 50, I don't mind it, of course. Cool calling here against a guy that comes to the flop with an 80% range or something like 60 to 80% and M. So against a regular, his range is somewhat faced up. He has some aces, some kings, some double suited rundowns, and some really good hands. I just try to hit my flops, of course, and then just donk shove as a short stack. And trying to capitalize a little bit on his low equity that he most of the time will have. So remember, he has an 80% range. We actually flop okay, and then we get it in. And he ends up having 3-3-9-9, and M has ace king king 4. So yeah, unfortunately he hit a set with his 80% range, which is, you know, not what you should expect. And then this guy also has a flush draw. So once we do see this board, one of the worst outcomes. Ace queen queen, we check back here, SPR1, setting the trap, and then I think I win this one. Oh, no, it's the straight on the river as well, so we lose this one too. I think I like the trap, of course, and he gets it in on the turn, having a really okay hand. Here we're facing a guy with an 80% range again. He raises though, and I mean that's between 50 and 80, 61 hands, but he plays almost every hand. So I want to get involved with him. Andre is short, he's gonna 3-bet a little bit more against him, I guess around 7-8%. We're not doing particularly well against, but I actually want to capitalize again on the very weak range, trying to hit my flops. Yeah, not happy that because once he gets 4-bet, even this guy probably has a hand, and then Andre probably also has an okay hand. Actually, I have to fold this flop, which I entirely miss. Bottom 10% for sure. And I didn't do too well because he ended up having, again, weirdly, a king, king, queen, queen. She's at the top of his range for sure. Yeah, and this guy had a solid ace 10, 9, 7 double. Here against Nebula, definitely a call and stack off on ripe flops with queen 10, 10, 7. Here again, I mean, probably facing an aces heavy range. Better to call than to fold against a 3-bet. Getting in on the flop, really good, but 8-8 counterfeits us too. We're getting now to the smaller pots. Cold calling. Here, I mean, what needs to be said is, okay, it goes check, 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 check. And then on the river, basically what I think, like, okay, if I had a 4-5, I probably would donk. If I had an nut flush, I probably would donk. So, you know, I'm going to have a reduced value range here on the river, which is made of maybe some sixes, some, you know, definitely some super nuts like quads, you know, some boats potentially, which I might not always donk the turn with. And then obviously all the 5-7 and all the ace-5 on the river for value. And then in terms of bluffs, I like hands that block, hands that have a 6 in them. So the rundowns that are just above the 6, the 7, 8, 9, 10, and just the 7, 8, 9, 10 should be my bluff. In my opinion, it never wins at showdown. It's also going to be a low frequency play because I'm going to have only this single suited and double suited. And then for all these combos, I'm going to have enough 5-7 and ace-5 to be making this bet size here. And he unfortunately ends up calling even the queens and even having, you know, a diamond in his hand, which I'm not a huge fan of, but, you know, in times where I never have value, I guess it's a call. Kings here has a short stack and a 3-bet, get it in. Coin flip, not a big deal. Here I have SPR2 with the kings. I'm not folding with the 10. And he ends up having limp, not re-raised aces. And yeah, not so nice. So this is only 2 more hands. Squeezing here with the double suited, pretty nice hand. Going, you know, multi-way to the flop, check it, and get it in on some turn. And then he has almost a dead hand. I wouldn't generally call here if I delay bet here. I mean, with this hand, because I'm not gonna have bluffs all that much or semi-bluffs, because, you know, he has the clubs already in his hand. So this is one of the bigger pots that I've won. here, fairly tough spot. He pot size bets, which, you know, sometimes people with king size it down a little bit, but this is not necessarily sizing tell. However, I'm not folding right away a set of 9s. Now he pots again, which is kind of, okay, what I'm gonna do, can I really fold here? So, I mean, go back to the flop, I beat king deuce, I beat nut flush plus a king, which, you know, I think should be always value betting here. So I definitely beat some value bets. I mean, if he thinks I'm always gonna have 9s, whatever, I think I just cannot fold given I have no hearts and I'm still strong enough. And he jams and we lose this one. Oh no, he has the 5 deuce. I was just kidding. We don't lose this one. We beat the value bet for once. Not entirely sure whether, you know, this is actually a call down against someone, maybe, you know, who has maybe too good of a betting range. I don't think this is a hand that he should end up with, but he ended up with it. So yeah, I was actually more, you know, hoping for him to show up with hearts plus, you know, some blockers that he value jammed a little bit thinner. Not this, because this is probably not a... Is it a flop bet? I mean, he has a backdoor flush draw. He needs some protection. Maybe he just bet folds it on the flop and... yeah, so that's about it, guys. This is, you know, how it went at the beginning of this year. Shortly after that, I went back to PLO200, PLO550, and, you know, made back some money because here I basically lost a bunch. Also, you know, I'm probably going to be back streaming. I was streaming today a little bit, and I'm going to be streaming on twitch.tv/tvtotaliwin. That's my screen of Poker Stars, and you can find me there streaming the great game of Pot Limit. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and I hope, you know, you can find maybe some hands that you can pick out if you want to know more about them and why I played them if I didn't explain myself enough. This has been a fairly long review of my hands. I just want to show you guys, you know, how it can go in this game sometimes. The swings are real. You know, if you play 3,000-4,000 hands and you just drop 15 buyins, don't be worried unless you really make a lot of punts. But, you know, I think you know, when you always get, for example, bluff catch when you bluff, it just sucks, you know. As you see, I picked like really the big bluffs that I made, like 3 over 4,000 hands. It's not that many. And when your opponent just always, you know, pressing that call button and you don't end up having value, then it's just meaning you're gonna lose money. This is how poker works, and yeah, this is what was happening. Definitely, though, you know, not wanna, you know, talk down more the mistakes that I've made after that. They're mostly not even in the big pots, because what you want to do is you also want to look at the small pots. For example, my red line was going down a bunch, and, you know, you might want to look at your fold to c-bet set, which in this sample is definitely too high. Trying to, you know, work in some more check raise bluffs here and there when you defend your big blind, for example, because if you fold too much, your red line will go down. And so, you know, most of my mistakes probably weren't in this sample. They were more on other, you know, situations that were not specifically here. But of course, you want to look at the big pots, and there was definitely 2 or 3 blunders in there that, you know, I would have played differently in hindsight. But yeah, this is what it is. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you next time.